Today, we're looking at what really makes Indonesia's economy tick. And we're diving into a study that suggests it's not just about the usual suspects like stocks and trade. It's a fascinating mix of finance, ethics, and policy. So let's get into it. We so often measure a country's success just by its GDP growth. But what if there's more to the story? What if the unique financial systems and maybe even the core values of a society play a massive role? That's the big question we're exploring today. Okay, so this research zooms in on three key drivers of Indonesia's economy. One of them is a pretty standard economic indicator, but the other two, well, they might surprise you. Let's break down how they all fit together to solve this puzzle. First up, we've got a familiar one, inflation. Simply put, it's how fast your money is losing its buying power. It's a classic, right? Something we all feel in our wallets. And as we're about to see, it plays a really critical role in how an economy behaves. Next, there's Sharia financing. Now, this isn't your typical banking system. Instead of just charging interest, it's built on the idea of partnership, sharing both the risks and the rewards, and making sure every transaction is tied to a real, tangible asset. And the final piece of our puzzle is the Maqasid al-Sharia Index. This concept is so interesting. Think of it like an ethical report card for a country. It measures how well its policies are actually protecting fundamental human values. It's a completely different way of looking at what development really means. All right, so let's start with our first variable. The study frames inflation not just as a number, but as a potential brake on the entire economic machine. So how exactly does it slow everything down? Well, when prices are shooting up, a few things happen. The money you've worked hard to save is suddenly worth less. Businesses get really nervous about making long-term plans because who knows what their costs will be tomorrow. This cloud of uncertainty hangs over everything, and it makes people cautious, stalling the whole economy. And this isn't some brand new idea. The research pulls from economists like Ng Menkyu, who basically argued that you need price stability first. Without it, everything else you try to build is just on shaky ground. It's an absolute prerequisite for growth that lasts. Now, let's switch gears. If inflation is the brake, this study positions Sharia finance as an accelerator, a model that can actually fuel progress in some pretty unique ways. So what's the big difference here? Conventional finance is usually a simple lender-borrower relationship. It's all about interest, but Sharia finance is set up as a true partnership. The bank and the entrepreneur are in it together, sharing the risk. And that fundamentally changes how money moves. And this partnership model has some powerful knock-on effects. It can bring people who are left out into the financial system. It gives critical funding to small and medium businesses, which are often the real engine of an economy. And because risk is shared, it encourages smarter, more careful investments, which can lead to a more stable financial system for everybody. Okay, on to our third and final variable. This one takes us from the world of finance into the realm of values. The Maqasid Index is like a moral compass, and it tries to measure a nation's development on a much, much deeper level than just money. So what does this compass actually measure? Well, it's built on these 5 core pillars. The index looks at how well a nation is safeguarding faith, life, intellect, which includes things like education and innovation, family structures, and finally, wealth itself through a fair and just system. So what does all this have to do with economic growth? Turns out, everything. A high score on this index basically means a country has its house in order. It suggests strong institutions, secure property rights, a reliable legal system, and investments in its people. These are the classic foundational ingredients for long-term growth. So, we have our 3 factors, the brake, the accelerator, and the moral compass. What happens when you actually test them against real-world data from Indonesia between 2020 and 2023? Well, here's the verdict. First, the verdict on inflation. The data confirms the theory, no question. There's a clear negative relationship. As inflation went up, economic growth went down. It acted exactly like the brake we talked about. Next up, Sharia finance. Here, the effect is just as strong, but it's positive. We see a clear upward trend. As the Sharia financing sector grew, so did the broader economy. This factor was clearly acting as fuel for the engine. And finally, that ethical report card, the Maqasid Index. The data shows that as a country's score improved, its economic growth also trended upwards. This really suggests that protecting those core societal values creates the stable foundation an economy needs to thrive. But here's the finding that really makes you stop and think. When you take these 3 factors together, inflation, Sharia financing, and the Maqasid Index, They can explain an incredible 81% of the changes in Indonesia's economic growth. That is a massive amount of explanatory power. So, the big takeaway here is that you can't look at these things in isolation. They're all part of one interconnected story. You need the stability from keeping inflation in check, you need the inclusive power of a financial system that works for more people, and you need that strong foundation built on core values and good governance. The study itself really hammers this point home, saying that it's not about picking one or the other. True, lasting success comes from a coherent policy package that weaves all three of these powerful forces into a single, unified strategy. And that leaves us with a final thought to chew on. We tend to think of economic assets as things we can count, factories, resources, stock markets. But this analysis from Indonesia suggests that maybe, just maybe, a nation's greatest asset is something a bit less tangible: the strength of its social contract, its commitment to inclusion, and the very values that hold its society together.